Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning if you're from the West
It's
Coast.
morning there.
So it is Monday. Yes, we are still talking about narcissists. Of course, if you guys been following me, I wrote a book about it. So I just didn't want you guys just to hear from me. I wanted you to hear from an expert. And so I brought an expert on. And if you guys had saw the banner, she is a mental health therapist, Miss Tamaria, Mrs. Let me say Mrs. Tamaria. Look, we had a long weekend, so that's why I put that Ms.
Right.
So Tamaria, tell us a little bit about yourself and what do you do?
Amazing. So I am a mental health therapist. Marriage and family therapy is the particular study branch that I journeyed into as a mental health therapist. Prior to receiving my master's and my degree, I'd actually been counseling for years. You know, a lot of us, we do it under coaching, the bracket of coaching. And so I had been counseling for years. And so I just kind of journeyed over to make it official. I wanted to get a degree so I can get some back understanding apart from what I was able to gain through coaching. And so it has been quite rewarding on this side. So yes, mental health um, is such a powerful now topic now, especially with the changes all over the world, the changes in economic based changes in the environment. Listen, pandemic, COVID 19, 2021, 22. Listen, it's creep 23. It has really shifted our mental status in some spaces. And so mental health has been a popular arena for quite some time. So I'm just happy to be a part of it.
That's good. That's good. So Tamiri and I, we had some conversations about different events that happened in my life with my late husband. And as we were talking, sometimes you don't know who's in your circle.
Yeah.
And so, I'll be thinking like, I actually need somebody who can speak to this on a professional level. I was like, oh, but it's like when it's like your girlfriend, you're like, okay, blah, 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 all this other type of stuff. And you be like, wait a minute, I can bring her in.
Yeah.
This is what she does professionally. And so I had listed a few things here about believing in the lie.
Mm.
So I have been married to my late husband for over 20 years, and we have four beautiful children together. And during this time, I began to find out through therapy for myself and through spiritual guidance that I was dealing with the individual who had narcissism. But that's again, I'm the expert for my own relationship within my own relationship. But
Right.
Tamaria, she deals with a different, a array of people,
Mhm.
children, grown-ups, male, female. So from the clinical term, what is a narcissist and how do you view it?
So, I hear a lot of people about this topic. It's so popular for obvious reasons when we look at the dynamic of a narcissist. But there's two things that I like to point out here when we look at a narcissist. Some people can have narcissistic traits, and then there's a difference between the narcissistic personality disorder. And sometimes, when we think about this particular topic, immediately we establish someone with their traits and kind of put them in the category of having the disorder. And those are two different things. When we look at like narcissistic traits, we can look at like the level of self importance, kind of preoccupied with self, sense of entitlement. We can look at it as arrogance, lack of empathy. That's actually one of the major plugs, is that it's the lack of empathy. These are things that are inside of the trait. They're kind of, they're kind of like preoccupied with self. And so some people may gravitate to a collection of traits but not necessarily have the personality disorder.
Hmm.
And the personality disorder, of course, it's diagnosed. And when we look at it, it's up to a higher level. It's where the individual, there are meeting majority of the character traits, if not in fact all of them. And
That's good.
so it's a difference. Some people, we see the narcissistic traits and immediately they're like, oh, you're a narcissist. Well, no, because how many of the traits did that individual, did they check off? Did they check off maybe one or two? Maybe we're dealing with something apart from a narcissist, right? Maybe this is just somebody that's stuck on self. Some people, their egos, it gets the best of them,
Right.
and
Right.
but they can be very about self, but they have a level of empathy for others. They are compassionate when it comes to people. They may be able to display the ability to share or to engage or to enjoy, versus those that have the personality disorder. They're unable to exude that, or when they do, it has like an underlining stipulation would usually point back to them. So it's a difference in that.
That's good, and I'm glad that you really explained that. Like I said, it took unfortunately years, for me to realize that, concerning my late husband. And some of the things that I realized, like too late, was that I got, let's see, I put down nine different things that they can actually manipulate. And as I read this, it was unfortunately, all nine is what I dealt with my late husband.
Wow.
One of the biggest things was, or tried to, was it was isolation. And that can be really hard when you have a huge family. So he has a huge family, I have a huge family. And so that was a little harder concerning, my family, but it began to happen. I remember one time, well, it wasn't one time, it was several times that we had moved out of state. And so when we go into state, both of our parents lived in the same state. And he would say like, "Oh, we're just going to visit my parents. Your parents are an hour away." I'm like, "Well, we just traveled 10 hours, so one more hour won't do." No, because the kids are tired and this, that, and the other. For me, that only happened once. I'm like, if I'm gonna go this far and not see my parents, I'm not going. And he thought I was playing, and I didn't go. And he tried to make a case for it, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm out. I unplugged." I'm not saying that was the right way to go, but I'm just telling you guys my story. I unplugged, and he said he spoke to his mother, which I later on found out that he did, and she was like, "You can't come this far and expect your children only to see one set of grandparents." It took his mother to say that, and to him, it was like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense because she said it." But when your wife said it, that meant nothing.
Mhm.
Again, it was the isolation, because when my mom was living, we would talk all the time. "Hey, mom, what's going on? Da da da." And so, of course, when I see a person, then I'm a hugger, so I'm connecting, and and all this, and the kids are seeing this interaction and they're loving it. But he would try to do that throughout the years, try to break me away from my sisters and my brothers. Again, during conversation, because of course he had their telephone number. He'd call them anytime. He had the email addresses. And when he passed away, I found out a little later on that he would reach out, or he had reached out to different one of my siblings to plead his case. Yeah.
Manipulation.
You say what?
Manipulation.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. And so with that isolation piece, according to, like I said, the professional stuff. So, so if you hear Tamaria speak more on a general level, again, if she hasn't met the person, talked to the person, she can't speak to that, because it's only one sided for me. But for the isolation piece, what can that do to a person when they are isolated from their support group, girlfriends, parents, siblings, even work sometimes. 'Cause like you said, COVID,
Hmm.
sometimes some of us still, we're not even going into the office.
Yeah, that isolation is such an underlining tip to what I would consider to be an iceberg. And so, literally, when if we were to look at a scale of where an individual is, isolation. if that was like the tip of your iceberg, there are so many underlining things underneath the water that people can't see that's going on. And so typically when we look at isolation, most of that underlining that you find depression. The depression begins to seep in because there's a lack of communication and lack of involvement. There's a lack of engagement with individuals that once had meaningful purpose in our lives that you're no longer being connected to. And a lot of times with isolation, yeah, we are isolated. Most of the times, those that are in those relationships, they're isolated sometimes from multiple standpoints. Sometimes it's because the partner no longer wants you to engage, or they try to manipulate the engagement or hinder the engagement. But then also a lot of individuals that are in those type of relationship patterns, they tend to isolate themselves because they don't want outsiders or other people or other parties to see or bear witness to what they're actually dealing with. And so most of the time, people that are in narcissistic relationships, they tend to want to cover the individual's personality traits, or try to cover what we see to be, as we can say, their faults, so that individuals won't have a weigh in or an opinion about the relationship you're in. And so that's another thing that you're battling with. And let me break it down in terms where people can understand, like, hey, listen, I don't really want my family to see what I'm dealing with. I don't want them to see the abuse, because even in those type of relationships, a lot of people don't realize just because it's not physical abuse doesn't mean that emotional abuse is not taking place, mental abuse is not taking place. It can go on. Emotional is probably the bigger of the weight. And so you don't want your family to see you in that dynamic, so you isolate yourself, right? And then with isolation, you're depressed because you're not yourself. You're not feeling like you're valued. It becomes depression because, hey, you see the world or people around you having happiness and peace, about the life that they're living. And you're realizing, man, that's not even my portion anymore. That's not where I'm living anymore. So the biggest of that I see is the depression that comes with that. And either of the equation, it doesn't equal to a healthy mental health status. It's not healthy, especially with women. Because we're such a protector. You were talking about it being your late husband. We're such a protector of our families. We're such protectors of our children and our partners that we tend to wear these hats. And just imagine putting on a hat, right? Because we're mom, we're wife, we're partner. But then you have to now wear the mask of shame because you don't want individuals to see where you are. And
I
so,
love
yeah.
that. You mentioned the thing shame. That was one of my first episodes talking about that, like the
Mhm.
shame, like getting over that. And we laugh, me, I'm a joyous person, so I'll laugh about some stuff. And I know you shake your head like, are we even supposed to be laughing at that? It's like, and one of the things I had put out there was like, I'm the one, I chose him.
Mhm.
I chose it. This was a choice that I made. And there were a lot of red flags that I decided that I was like, oh, yeah, because in my head, right here, I
Right,
was like, oh,
right.
yeah, I can change him. Let me tell y'all something. Now, this is Michelle talking, and then
Mhm.
I'll let the therapist talk on that. You cannot change anybody. I got 4 kids, okay, who came from this womb of mine. Do you think I could change them? Now, I can guide them, you know, but once they leave outside the house and go to school, and then I'm thinking I change them until I get the call from the teacher and say, your daughter, your son.
Right, right.
Wait a minute. I don't raise my kids to be this way. So I am the first to say, if one of the things that's popping up in your head, oh, I'm gonna change him. I'm gonna change her.
Mhm.
Can you even change some of those habits that you have eating them chips in the middle of the night or them cookies? I'm just throwing it out there.
Right. Come on. Oh, like, not today.
So when people believe, and I want you just to speak on that piece.
Sure.
What does that mean to us when we believe as a person that we can change another person? Like, how stressful is that just for us? And then how stressful is that for the other person?
Well, let me tell you how I see it. And I have clients that just be like, "Oh my God, Miss Weaver, I didn't think of it that way." When you feel the need to want to change somebody, typically I look at you and say, "What's the void that you're looking at? What's voided in your life?" That's the start, because why are you wanting someone else to change versus you changing how you see yourself and how you view yourself? And once you begin to start that change, you will realize that the way that you're being treated and the way that you're being responded to, does it fit what you designed for your life? Does it fit what you saw happening in your life? Does the character traits that's being pushed in your direction, how does it make you feel, right?
Mhm.
Do you feel like, man, this is good? Do you feel comforted? Do you feel supported? Do you feel like, man, this is helping me to build? Because when we put together families, ultimately a goal is to build something, whether from an entrepreneurial standpoint, whether you want to build a big family that's filled with love, joy, and peace. And so the first thing I began to look at is, what void do you have where you feel like you want to change somebody? But then let's add in the narcissist and the individual that is really in a place where they are unreasonably high in sense of self and self-importance. When you go in and you're thinking for a narcissist, like, even for the traits, let me say that individuals that display more than like 5 or 6 of those traits, most of the time with the narcissist, they're so good at manipulating. It's very rare that you can go and change anything about them, because remember, they're operating at a high level of arrogance. And
Mm.
so they already feel preoccupied by power. They already are, preoccupied with admiration of self. And so that power, in addition to the equation of self, to them, there's nothing wrong with me.
Mm.
It's all the people who I'm dealing with, which is why you need me in your life, because I am important. I make changes in your life. I am all you need. I am the one that's going to make you. I'm the one that's going to get you. You hear these things. I'm the one that gets you to where you are. You wouldn't have
Right.
gotten this far if it wasn't for me. You wouldn't have made it this far if I had not given or I did not do. It never is the category R structure when you're dealing in that kind of relationship is rare, because it's about self. So when you start hearing these phrases and this vocabulary word and you try to go in and change, you can't change an individual alone, that automatically exudes power of self.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
See,
remember, okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, no, I was about to say because yes, I keep promoting my book. Um,
Plug
uh,
in.
yeah, I know. It's like no, I talk about that. I have one scenario in there where I talk about uh that I was in school, and so I'm writing papers and I'm doing this, and so I'm going to school, full time mom. Well, not you're always a full time mom. It doesn't matter if you work out in or outside the house. Working outside the house, wife, this, that, and the other. And I started to get like really great grades again in school. And when you say I, and it was like, well, if I didn't take the kids to this event, then you would have never got this A in the class. Well, that's not true. It was like because many a times I myself would go to bed at 3 a.m. in the morning so I can get the work done. So I would get a lot of because of this, that, and the other. Now you made it a whole lot easier. Yes, I needed your support. That made it a whole lot easier because that's what spouses are supposed to do.
Correct.
But like you said, it was that over importance of if I wasn't in your life, then you would have never accomplished that.
Mhm.
And if you believe the okey doke, that's what I call it. I want to call it something else, but we're not going to. But if you fall for it, then you're like, oh my gosh, like, oh yeah, I will always need this person because this
Mhm.
person is right. And he and she is saying this, and they have taken the place. I know we're not going to talk about that like big, but they've taken the place of God. Okay. Only God can do that. So we'll leave that piece like right there. The other thing is financial uh, expectation is that they will, now I have, like I said, this is one of my things, is leaving you financially drained and vulnerable. um and I didn't talk about that in my book because everything I have put out there, if you guys know me, I'm a bit of a private person, but it was at a point where he had completely emptied the bank account. And because we shared an account, I don't go out there looking at it every day. I had expected, everything to be taken care of until it wasn't. And
Mm,
then now, because there was no money in the account and he put the money in another account, now he can control me. Like, now
mm,
I'm asking him for everything.
mhm.
Like, okay, we need money for this, the kids need money for that, this, that, and the other. But when that happened, I did write in the book. That's what I was like, deuces, I'm out. Like, there's no way that I will live that way or my children live that way. Um, Especially being just everything that God has showed me that I needed to be. So I knew that wasn't that was a no-go. But
Yeah.
I know with some people, they think that that's a reasonable type of, I don't know, ask.
It's because it resorts back to and it reverts, excuse me, it reverts back to the sense of self-importance. That's one of the traits, or it's a part of the personality disorder. The dependency that you're needing to need them. Um, it's a self implementation into every aspect of your life. And the biggest dynamic in that is that you said that you thought it was already there, but it wasn't, right? um it's when we look at the financial piece of it, and let's not just look at, if you want to take the financial aspect or add in other areas for those of you watching, like, well, hey, financially wasn't my thing, but socially, emotionally, you want to add those in there too. It's where they have the inability, or watch this one, y'all, the unwillingness to recognize the needs of others.
Mhm.
So when you realize that the inability means they're able to, but they're not,
Mhm.
or because of the personality disorder, they can't. You see the
Mhm.
difference? So when we look at traits, is it inability or is it the unwillingness, versus with the personality disorder, they can't recognize the needs of other people. And so where you were was there was a need financially. There was a moment that you needed. And so let me pull her blanket of need and implement my strategy of self-importance so that her need has to be fulfilled through me. And again, it's the power. And
Mhm.
so a lot of those traits, or within the personality disorder, one of the bigger things that I see is the need to control. I want to control everything because I want you to understand that you need me. I am so important. And because I control everything, then you have to come back to me. And so it then puts me back into that space where I mentioned earlier about power. So now
Mhm.
I'm above you because you need me. You see how that works? And so typically, in either the personality trait or the personality disorder or the trait, it's a need of control. And that control reverts back to self. But sometimes individuals, when we're in those spaces, or the clients and the people that I see in those spaces, and they're like, man, it's just like I feel like I'm in a box. That's the category when people are describing that space to me. I feel like I'm in a box, and no matter how I kick, how I scream, or how I push, it feels like they control the box, which hinders my being able to get out. Yes, that means, guess what? You may be in a relationship with someone that has narcissistic traits or has the narcissistic personality disorder. But what happens next? What are you wanting to do about it?
That's good. That's good. So I have a question here. And I'll put my little take on it and then of course from you. So I'm assuming this question is for you. And that is setting boundaries. And so we're talking about I guess we could be talking about dating couples too, but like with married couples and setting boundaries because we're married. Okay, here it goes. Okay, so when is it that you are? Okay, when is it? When do you realize that they are no longer respecting your boundaries, and when do you? When is it? That's not making any sense. Uh, when is it compromise or complimentary? Okay, I may have to reword that. But they're talking about boundaries. They want to make sure that as a couple that you're hearing the other person's needs,
Mhm.
but not, it looks like, but not discarding your needs, and not
Absolutely.
being that. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
I can
Okay.
help that one. So let's say this, and can I say this with boundaries? Because I want to make sure I plug this in. Boundaries aren't necessarily anchored to narcissistic traits or personalities, y'all. This is really relationship. And can I say it's not even relationship with your significant other or your partner? It's really in friendships and every dynamic where there is a mission in which you're joining with someone. When we look at personalities, especially with narcissists, when we're looking at boundaries, um, when your boundaries are invalid, let me look at it from that place to answer that question. It's when no matter how many times you've expressed the limit, express the max, meaning the limit in which you can operate in or at the max level you're willing to operate in. And either of those sectors, it has just been completely overlooked, ignored, or obliterated. Like, I'm not doing that. There's no respect to the boundary. That is a clear indication that the individual is not wanting to follow or has the respect for the boundaries that you've asked for. And so, one thing I can actually share with you all, if you're in a relationship in that space and you want to continue to be there, right? This is where I highly plug in, get with a therapist,
Absolutely.
because sometimes, and this is not just a narcissist, some people, even those with those traits, y'all, when they feel that they're right, it's hard unless there is a third party or a professional that has no like, we have no common denominator between the two. We're just simply either a professional or a third party that's on the outside looking in, and we're giving our depiction of what should be and what shouldn't be. But really, boundaries, especially with someone that has narcissistic traits, it really does put in place, hey, this is what I'm willing to accept and this is what I'm not. Where the boundaries become grayed is when you implement a boundary, they choose not to follow, and then you make it okay. You
That
just basically said to that person,
Yeah.
I had boundaries, you didn't like it, so I'm going to take it off the map. You have to reiterate those boundaries, put them in such black and white. I love, I tell anybody, if we're doing communication with anything, and for anybody that's out there, when we look at communication, and especially for those that you are in corporate America, everybody says, I like black and white. That is ink. You can give me a pen, wet to paper, send an email, because what? It's clear documentation. And so when you're implementing boundaries, stop letting people come and use color pencils when you need it to be black and white. You have to be able to say, this is what it is, and there is no gray, there is no green, there is no pink, there is no orange. You will respect the boundaries that I put in place. So if my boundaries are clear indicators of where my max is, where my minimum is, and what I purely am willing to accept. If you're in a relationship with someone that clearly wants to continue to write in red, then why are you still there?
that is really good because last week I spoke about it's like, because the name of this is finding peace in a lie, because I decided that whatever he said was like, let's just go with it because I didn't want to argue. I
Mhm,
began to lose a lot of myself. I
mhm,
began to lose just me, who I am. I like to live out loud. I love to laugh.
right.
Even though, when it comes to these social platforms, you hear me talk about business, but outside of that, completely different. So that's why I'm allowed to be myself. And one of the things is that I am very corporate. I had someone told me I told her, I was like, "You're very corporate." She was like, "What? You're very corporate." And for some people, that's like, what does that mean? Like traditional. We like things in place. And so one of the things that was happening, because I own my own business, and he was able to manipulate me. I just would go with the flow, except for when it came to my business. Now, when it came to my business or certain things, he had no say so in it, because I understood that he wasn't a part of the business. And so looking at people's information, that was always out for me. I was like, no, this is personal. What reason do you have to look at it? And now if you want to get on the books, you want to get on the payroll, you got to do some work. So when it came to certain things, I was very strict. So one of the ones was, like you said, write it down. This is the way it's going to be. Was that I had male and female clients. It didn't matter, it was like we would either meet via Zoom or we would meet in person. And again, it was like I had different packages, or I have different packages. So the larger the package, usually we met in person based off the service. But he always knew that I was going to meet a client. I never hid that, male or female. If he says male, yeah, female, yeah, no big deal. I remember one time though, he said, "Oh, you're meeting this client at this five-star restaurant. I need to go with you to make sure he's on the up and up." And I was like, "Well, hold on. We meeting at lunchtime, where usually in restaurants is most crowded. Uh, I'm meeting him there. It's not like he's picking me up." And I knew that he was trying to control that aspect of my life, which was a no-go. Because
Mhm.
again, like I said, I might have would have thought about it if it was more on the personal side. But again, why am I meeting somebody personally? But that's a whole nother conversation. Um, and I was like, no. He was like, "Well, I don't have to sit at the table. I'll just sit at another table and be across the room." Well, I'm like, what? Like, that don't even make any sense. Like, why would you come? He was like, "Well, I could drop you off." I was like, "Yeah, I don't mind you dropping me off, but you're not coming in." I was like, so now he's trying to have that control, and, "I just want to make sure X, Y, and Z." And I was like, no, but I didn't know during this time he was strategizing. He was trying to make a case of me being an unfaithful wife. I found that out later. Later on in this big old, as they call it, soap opera drama, that X, Y, and Z. So I love when you said that when you write it, it's black and white. Don't let
Mhm.
somebody be writing in green. Okay, this is the first pen that I can grab, but she said red.
Right.
Black and white, black and white, and stick with it. And that's really, really important. All right, so last question here. How do
Right.
you know when now you've I know you've heard of gaslighting. Um, so how do you know when, while you're dating, that your date, and so this could be male or female,
Uh-huh.
is gaslighting you or trying to exploit your emotions?
Oh, that's good. Um, so let me just tell y'all, I had to learn what gaslighting is because my kids, I'm like, y'all, what's the new lingo? And so I heard a word this morning, and my son called someone default, and I was like, what is that? Like, so trying to keep up with everything is hilarious now. So I just learned gaslighting is. So if I don't answer correctly, listen, y'all, this is my son definition, so I'm gonna just go for it, okay? But gaslighting and exploitation are kind of two different arenas. And when we look at the aspect of either, you know, it's this is a tricky one. Let me tell you why. Um, because depending on the individual, why would you feel either one? And sometimes you can feel like somebody is exploiting you emotionally because you're dealing with past traumas and things that
Mhm.
people have done. And so, where somebody may be genuinely inserting themselves, you behind the scene to think someone may be exploiting you yourself have dealt with something traumatizing where someone has exploited you emotionally or made you feel incomplete, invalid, unworthy, either of those categories, and it affected you emotionally. And so sometimes when we enter into spaces and relationships, we immediately articulate that individual from what happened traumatized in the past. We bring that trauma into our current relationship. And then when we know we're dealing with a narcissist, now all of a sudden you respond in that magnitude. And so, if that's not the case, when someone is exploiting you, whether that person is a narcissist or not, I ask the question, what is the purpose? Like, what is the validation that they're looking to gain? Are they trying to exploit you because they want to see you happy, healthy, whole? And they want you to understand, hey, you need to be able to share this information because it's going to help you? Or are they exploiting it for self gain? And then in
Mm.
that space, I'm asking, well, why are you remaining in that space? Because to me, when it comes to emotional expression, if it's not a clear indicator, I want this public, why is it not in remaining in the bracket of private? And
Mm.
so, any emotional stance, if I or the individual, whomever asked the question, if you did not specify that this is a public matter, then why is it being exploited publicly instead of remaining in a private setting? So then I start to question the space that you're in that relationship. What are they looking to gain from the union between you two? What are they
That's
looking to gather from your relationship? So let's stop looking at the emotional stance and let's start looking at the idea of what's your reason for wanting to be in this relationship with me? What are you wanting to gain? Because any level of exploitation shouldn't be tolerated, right? And so
that's
what is the mission here? What are we looking to do? What was your reasoning for wanting to even exploit it? So I would take the feeling of being upset that it happened or it's happening, take the emotion off of it, and let's start looking at the actual factor of what equation are you putting together where exploitation is the denominator? Like what equation you're gathering that exploiting me is the end result? Like what are you doing? What are we looking to do? And so that becomes another level of, hey, let's remove um our emotion and let's start evaluating these spaces and these relationships that we tie ourselves in. And let me add this one plug, Michelle, I'm so sorry, let me add this in.
no, no,
You
go
know,
for it.
when we get into these relationships, a lot of us, we don't take time to heal. And so you immediately jump from relationship without a bracket or an area to allow yourself to decompress and to heal. Find out what you lost from that last space. Find out what you did not gain. Find out what was not successful, what did not work. And I'm not talking about the person. I'm talking about the mirrored reflection, and the evaluation of what happened in the mirror. And the mirror is just you, right? And the reflection of what happened. And so once we begin to evaluate those things of what it is that we like, what we want, what doesn't work, because let me say, I'm not for every single person, right? I'm not going to be liked by everybody. I'm not for everybody. Everybody may not laugh at my jokes. Everybody may not eat food the way that I eat a meal. Everybody may not enjoy the life perks that I enjoy. However, there is someone out there that can really love on my qualities and help to build my character. But where are they? But if we're
Mm.
not careful in our level of healing, we will continue to jump in these relationships that instead of using our black and white, they want to use every color in the crayon box. And instead of us getting time to get an eraser and take off the color and go back to a black and white format, we jump into another relationships carrying red, blue, orange, or purple. And so the next person is now adding to that. And then we become in a place where what we want, what we need, and what matters to us become vague. It become a
Hold on,
mirage.
I gotta say something. That when you started saying all those colors, if you guys have ever been a kid, and if you're watching
Uh-huh.
this, you have been. When you add all those colors together, what does it look? It looked like mud. So mud is not clear. You
It's not.
just, I just
Yeah.
saw mud.
It's not
Mud
good.
is not clear, and a
Yeah,
lot of
it's
times you
not.
don't even know what's in mud. You're
Mhm.
like, okay, what is this? Did he
Mhm.
cheat? Did she cheat? Did they take money? Did is that? I
All of
mean,
those
here's
ground,
like,
all of those
what
things.
they say, as clear as mud.
Listen, even if you remember when we used to color in school, right? And remember when we would try to do the watercolors? When we
Hmm.
mix all the colors, we get like a dirty gray, brownish color. It's not a clear indicator what the color was that we were trying to exude from the portrait. And so imagine if your life is a portrait, what color is exuded through you? We got to stop letting everybody come in with their wet paint and paint in, and then we would find ourselves in these limited spaces where these people with these narcissistic personalities or traits, we can begin to define the clear line if you choose to stay in that space in hope of that person, because I'm not telling nobody to break up with nobody, but if
Right.
that's what you're going to do, you would try to find some kind of common ground, exceptional boundaries, not just regular in those spaces, exceptional boundaries, and you will be
Mhm.
able to create the space that you were looking for, you know? And so I just think that we have to start looking at self reflection as well, so we can kind of prohibit ourselves from entering into these spaces that are seemingly not healthy.
I love it. I love it.
Me
So
too.
there is so much that goes into understanding not only yourself, because you talked about learning about yourself, the deficiencies within yourself. Like, again, I made the choice. I made the choice to marry who I married, just plain and simple. That wasn't his decision. That was my decision. Right. And of course, together we had to make the decision to get married and to have children. So before we start throwing that blame on anyone, even in my book I talk about, I made the choice about a lot of these things, because in my head I thought that I was going to go ahead and change him. And religion, I talk a little bit about religion in the book, about how it's just taboo to divorce. So again, I'm there too. So it's like all of this stuff, like this stuff is about Michelle, but because I'm going through all of this, that doesn't mean that it's okay to be mistreated. And that's what you talk about. So whatever your decision, and you're not sure, that's how come I brought Tamaria on. If you're not sure,
Right.
don't believe Michelle. You heard her. She talked about black and white and all these other type of colors that y'all supposed to have all like colored up in there. Talk with a professional.
Yeah.
Talk with a professional. Talk. You are not a professional. Okay. I'm not a.
Right.
Okay. When I say you, I'm not talking about
I
Tamaria.
know, I know. I got what you said. Yeah.
That we are not professionals, and then if you're not ready to talk to a professional, talk to somebody who really supports you and who's positive. Yeah, guys. And I have to say that positive part. We have folks who be like, girl, if he treat me this way, I would da 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 da. Okay, so
Right.
let's get past all that.
Mhm.
I need to know, something definite and not so much emotional driven, because that's huge. So Tamaria is going to come on tomorrow with me and Maria, and so we're going to shift it a little bit more, and we're going to talk about and it's the same thing, narcissists, but in any type of relationship, in our business and in our professional relationships. And again, which strategies do we need to employ when we are interacting with different individuals like that? Because guess what? We're business owners, we're in professional spaces, we go to grocery stores. So we're going to encounter different people. So she's going to give us some strategies and some steps on that to
Yeah.
help us. But, because again, this was more on the marriage part and the dating part. And so I'm gonna have Tamiria close us out with, if a person does or do, I know grammar, find out that they are in a very extremely unhealthy relationship, what are a few steps that they should take to, either get help or to get out?
The first thing for the individuals, let me say this: if you're in a physically abusive relationship, um, to me, a narcissist doesn't have to be tacked to that. Um, if you don't have insurance where you can seek immediate counsel, you can call the abuse hotline. and you can get some assistance so you can get out of that space. I don't believe that no individual should succumb themselves to being in a relationship where they're being physically attacked and or abused daily. No matter how many times that individual may have shared with you that they're sorry, if they've hit you once, twice, that's two, that's one, twice, once, twice too many. And for those of you that feel like, man, I feel like I am in a narcissistic relationship, and you want to figure out, what do I do? How do I get out? My advice is to seek immediate counsel. You can find a licensed family therapist. You can find an LPC. You can find either, you can do a psychiatrist. You may need something in assistance to the therapy. And so my advice is to seek counsel. And let me add this plug in. Some of us feel that I hear clients all the time state that, well, I wanted to start therapy, but they did not want to. Well, the therapy is not immediately for the couple stance, it's really for the individual. So if you yourself are in a relationship where you're being abused mentally, emotionally, socially, physically, mentally, either of those categories, I suggest that you find immediate counsel so that we can get you to a place where you can start to identify yourself and start your journey in healing. And then if that individual is where you want to remain, once you start to get yourself in a place where you have assistance, I'm not sure if you're going to stay in it after you've gotten the help you need. Maybe you are. And then we can bring that individual along the journey. But can I tell y'all, the biggest mistake that I hear is that I wanted to do therapy, but they did not. Well,
Yeah.
you need the therapy. So if they don't come, it's not about a dynamic of y'all. Let's get some things sorted out with you. So let's start with counseling for you first.
That's good. No, that was great, great advice, guys. I'm all about therapy. I would have to say, and it's not changing as fast as I would like it to change.
Mhm.
I don't care if you black, get a therapist. Okay. And I gotta throw it out there because our community is like, I don't need no therapy. Yes, you do.
Yeah, they do.
And I was like, our ancestors was dragged from a whole nother continent. We all need therapy. Okay. So that's a whole nother conversation, y'all.
Mm.
But therapy is not bad, it's not evil. Even in the Bible, it talks about wise counsel. So if we're talking about talking to the religious people, even Jesus had wise counsel. Okay. So we need wise counsel. Even the leaders had wise counsel. We need wise counsel. And therapists and counselors and psychiatrists and psychologists, they fall under the same thing as medical doctors. We need wise counsel. So don't stop with what's in your head. Just, so get help. So Tamaria, thank you so much for joining me today. This was really, really good. If you guys have any questions, make sure you tag her from whatever platform that you're watching this from. This is just really important for us to live our best life and not have someone, try to snuff that out because they're not sure where they're at. So, again, I talk about that in the book. But if you guys have any questions, reach out to me. I'll see you next week.